Feedback is ultra critical for eBay sellers. If you have good feedback, buyers will trust you. If you have bad feedback, buyers don't trust you. You make more sales when you have better feedback. If you start getting too many negative feedbacks, eBay will start punishing you in the search engine algorithm and ultimately could possibly lower your entire rating. eBay was really the first website to provide for an eBay system, and I wish that they would be a little more supportive of it today, but it turns out, as I'll mention later on, it turns out that eBay is less likely to remove negative and neutral feedbacks on sellers who do not deserve it. Now, if you deserve a negative feedback, you deserve it, and you should just take your lumps and see what happens. I mean, you deserve it. You know, you didn't ship something, you shipped the wrong item, you didn't wrap it well, it broke. That's all deserving of negative feedback. Now, there are ways to make something like that situation, any of those situations, correct. And a buyer might not leave you negative feedback. Also, the wonderful thing about eBay is if you're a top-rated seller, I believe it's a full week that buyers must wait before they can leave you a negative feedback. And this is in hopes that the buyer will try to work it out with the seller. That's a wonderful system. It's great that eBay doesn't let buyers just leave negative feedback immediately whenever they're dealing with a top-rated seller. A top-rated seller generally is far more likely to do what she or he says they're going to do. A top-rated seller is far less likely to make a mistake, to ship something without wrapping it properly. Things still happen, but they're less likely. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made top-rated seller. In general, it's harder to make top-rated seller if you're a bad seller. You're pleasing more people if you're a top-rated seller. So eBay does sort of work with you now. Used to, if a seller got an undeserved negative feedback or neutral feedback, you'd call up eBay support or go online and say, call me, or go to the chat. And generally, if it was obvious it was undeserved, then they would remove that feedback. All is well. They're not as likely to do that anymore, as I'm about to explain, and I'll explain possible reasons why. These days, everyone wants feedback. Anytime you visit any web page, it's like you get a bunch of emails saying, please let us know how your experience was. And I suggest you don't answer any of those. I suggest you don't give anyone feedback unless there's something in it for you. It's not your job to help every company that you've ever dealt with on earth, but that's kind of what they're all doing now. They really bug you for feedback. eBay was the first and best, and I think you should still leave feedback for buyers and sellers. But as a buyer, you have the option of leaving neutral, negative, or positive feedback, and as a seller, you want positive feedback for many reasons. eBay no longer removes feedback as easily as they used to. I'm about to tell you why, and possibly the tide is turning slowly. Someone in our Facebook group, the Facebook group that goes with this channel, and it's free to join, and you should join it. It's called the Ultra Advanced eBay Guy, and we have a lot of fun in that group, and you can ask questions, although you can also ask questions right here on YouTube. I answer every single question, no matter what it's about, whether it's on the topic of the video or not. I'll try to help you out anytime that you need help. I will be there. But in our group, we do a lot of interactions. We have a Be on the Lookout document that's always updated. It's really an incredible Facebook group already, and it's fairly new. You should go over there to Facebook if you're a Facebook user and join our Facebook group. But in the meantime, someone named Bobby asked a question. I got neutral feedback. I didn't deserve it, and he described why, and sure enough, he didn't. What is there anything that I can do now that eBay makes feedback harder to remove? And my answer was, yes, there are a few things that you can do. I would say there are a few things you can try, but these generally probably will work towards, in many cases, getting your feedback removed by eBay or possibly by the buyer who left it. And so I'm about to show you the answer that I sent Bobby directly, but I thought it would be good for all of you to see what's going on here. Hey Bobby, sorry about the feedback. I know that eBay is tougher on feedback as far as sellers go. There seems to be a movement changing direction that eBay is going to take more of a seller-centric approach again. It comes in cycles. It's the oddest thing. and they've kind of gotten away from it for 2 or 3 or 4 years and moved more towards they were interested in the high-end items like, Coach bags and high-end watches and trading cards, and gotten away from the consumer to consumer, or as eBay calls it, C to C transactions. They're not getting away from it. That's a huge part of eBay's business, people selling to people, but they haven't really focused on people like us as much lately. And it comes and goes. And the woman who is totally responsible for this recently left eBay. I don't think there was necessarily bad blood there, but she's gone, and we were kind of seeing a shift back to a seller-centric focus, sellers that are more everything sellers and so forth, more individual to individual types of sellers. So that's the good news, but they're certainly not there now yet, and they certainly are not as easy to remove feedback as before. And eBay, you might recall, because of the systematic destruction of our economy by those in power, because of that, over the last 2 or 3 years, eBay had to let go, I think, 1,000 people, 1,000 employees. Recently in the news, it's been now maybe 3 months, but in the last 2 to 4 months, eBay, I believe, has worldwide gotten rid of 1,000 people. And so they have to decide where are we going to utilize our resources. And I think that was part of the decision, that we just can't be messing with feedback all that much. But there are things you can do. In your case, the neutral feedback over nothing, that nothing was deserved about your neutral feedback. You could write the buyer, you could message the buyer, and you could say, I certainly appreciate your leaving feedback. You obviously know it's important for us sellers. Now, Bobby, I'm just going to throw this out. This may not be an option you want to do. I have done this twice before in certain circumstances, and I don't remember what triggered me to try this, but I tried it. I actually said something along the lines of, the problem with neutral feedback or negative feedback, if you get that, is my family relies on eBay in these perilous economic times, and every penny counts. And whenever we don't get all positive feedback, unless it's deserved that we didn't get a positive feedback, but if we didn't really do anything to warrant anything but positive feedback, it starts hurting our sales, that eventually eBay will start lowering us in the search engine. You could say that. That's absolutely true. Or it's also absolutely true that other buyers just don't trust you as much whenever your feedback score isn't as high. And so, since this was not your fault, and that he was just commenting on the product itself that he was buying, would he consider redoing the feedback? Would he consider changing the feedback? And where do you do that? So on your feedback profile, I believe, and I don't have any negative or neutral feedback, so I'm not trying to brag at all by saying that. I sort of wish I did so I could show this to you. I suspect whenever you get a neutral or negative feedback, there's actually a way to, there's something here, I believe, over here, not just a reply, but I think there's an option to contact the buyer about feedback, request a feedback change or something. So the first thing I want you to do is look at that and see if there's some sort of a link other than reply. Now, replies are good. Here we go. Here's one that I replied to recently. Very well packaged, such a thoughtful note. They always mention the note. This pattern holds many memories for me, and I'm grateful to add pieces from your family to mine. And I said, it is our, because I always use our, it's always a family. I'm always pushing my family, which is kind of what I'm telling you here. It was our pleasure knowing that our 6-decade-old, still lovely family dish, and this is true, these were mine as a kid, my parents, family dishes are going into the hands of a new family who can enjoy them for many more decades. We appreciate you sincerely, Jane and Greg. So a reply allows you to reply to really nice feedbacks, which I do often. Here I did another one. But it also allows you to reply to neutral or negative feedbacks. If someone accuses you of something you didn't do, you don't want to reply and say, you're lying. Nothing like that, because you've got other buyers who are looking at this, potential buyers. You want to be very professional and say, we offer 60-day money-back guarantee, free returns, no questions asked. Feel free to return it. We will take care of you. We'll refund you immediately. And by the way, eBay tells us that if we have a no questions asked refund policy and the buyer returns an item and we refund them, eBay promises that they will automatically remove neutral or negative feedback. I think that it often works that they remove it. I don't know, I'm not convinced it's 100% always working that they do that. And I don't know why, but they do say it gets removed. So in a negative feedback or something undeserved, I would make that route. If there's anything other than just reply like a challenge feedback, request a change, do that. And you could just say something like I told you, my family rely on this. If we get anything but a positive feedback, unless it's our fault, then it really hurts us going forth, and I was wondering, would you mind? Now, there's something, if you don't want to go that route, there's something, or if you go that route and the buyer doesn't do it, or if you go that route and whatever here is not a link to change the feedback, your buyer may just not know how to do it and would just ignore it, unless there's a way to actually ask the buyer to request a feedback change here. I would then go to your seller protections page. Just Google eBay seller protections and you'll find it. And what you do is drop down and you open up this plus here. A buyer falsely claims an item was not as described. That's not exactly what happened to you, but this should work. Should work. If the other one doesn't, eBay's not always great anymore about removing feedbacks. As a matter of fact, they're not very good at it at all compared to what they used to be. But if the buyer doesn't return it, and I don't think your buyer will, I think your buyer wants it, but they're just kind of a not too friendly type of person. But a buyer falsely claims, I would report this buyer. And we will subsidize the return shipping label up to $6. So you need to tell eBay in this, whatever happens whenever you report the buyer, it'll come up with a screen and ask you questions, I'm sure. And it says, did you return the item? Did your buyer return the item? You can say, well, the buyer didn't want to return it. They just left us neutral feedback about the product itself. It has nothing to do with our service. We do have a return guarantee, but the buyer didn't want to do that. And then it says, we'll automatically remove any related negative or neutral feedback. The return won't be counted in your not as described rate in your metrics. Now again, you don't have a not as described, but I would report this buyer if you decide not to do the other option, or if you try it and it doesn't work. I would put in that note, if you go that route and try to use the emotions of the buyer and say, it'll really help my family out. Could you modify this, since you were talking about the product itself that you purchased and not anything that we did. We would never want to, do something to deserve even neutral feedback. We only want to have an all-class 5-star, all-positive service for you. And feel free to return the item. I think it would be good if you go that route first to, in this report, let eBay know we did remind the buyer that please return it. We will immediately give you your money back. And they decided not to. So, but this will not be counted against you. I think I would try that second, or do this first if you don't want to do the emotional plea, which I think is, in this case, probably worth trying. It's all just such a hassle. And it's, you don't deserve this. You don't deserve the feedback. It's such a hassle to mess with this. It really is. I've wasted time here on this buyer that was just kind of a jerk, right? We've all lost time here. Although I want it to be helpful to the group, so it will help other people, I hope. But I'm just saying that this is all just such a hassle whenever it really just shouldn't happen this way. eBay really ought to, look, you ought to be able to report a neutral or negative feedback and put as the reason it was about the product itself, nothing to do with my service or anything, and it's just automatically removed for good sellers. But for some reason, they're not in that mode right now, so we kind of have to jump through hoops. I hope this helps give you a couple of options at least. Worst case, you've got a neutral feedback. It could be worse. It could be negative. It really won't hurt your metrics, really. 5 of them will. 1 of them won't. So it's not the worst thing in the world, but you just don't want it, you know? You just don't want it, which is why you asked this. I hope this helps.